Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a resumption of hearing 25, which today and tomorrow we're dealing with areas that we've euphemistically called rest of district. And by that we mean they're not part of any individual towns or centres for the most part. They're a series of submitters that don't logically necessarily fit in with those from a bunch of other parties. So that's what we're here to do today. My name is Phil Mitchell. I'm an Independent Hearings Commissioner and I'm chairing the District Plan hearings. I'll ask the rest of the panel to introduce themselves at the outset. Then I want to just explain a little bit about how the hearing will run, and then I'll ask people that are going to present to us to briefly introduce themselves as well. And at the same time, if they've got any questions about the process that we're following, they can do that at that time as well. So if I could just ask, please, the panel members to introduce themselves. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Jan Sedgwick. I'm a Waikato District Councillor and appointed as an Independent Hearing Commissioner.
Hello, I'm Diane Fulton. I'm an Independent Commissioner, but a former Waikato District Councillor.
Good afternoon, Janet Gibb, current councillor at the Waikato District Council and appointed as Independent Commissioner.
Kia ora, Will Marg, Independent Commissioner.
I'm Paul Cooney, Deputy Chair, Independent Commissioner and lawyer.
Thank you. I'll get the staff to introduce themselves in a minute with the rest of the people that are here today. What I do want to say, because I think we've got a number of people here today that haven't been involved in our hearings before, and I just want to make a couple of points that hopefully will be of assistance to everybody. The first one is that we've done as a panel a large number of these Zoom hearings. We find them to be particularly useful insofar as we're able to sit in our own space without needing to travel for vast distances, and the feedback we've had from participants is similarly positive in that regard. They feel that they can come and go a little bit as they please. They can come and present their submission. They don't have to drive into Ngaruawahia. They don't have to take days off work, all those sorts of things. One of the reasons why we think these hearings are working really well for us is the fact that all the information that we're going to talk about today has been pre-circulated. So we're very grateful for everybody for providing written statements of evidence and rebuttal statements, and in some cases summary statements and so forth. And the consequence of that is that these hearings are intended to focus on what it is that's troubling people and what it is they want us to do about it, as opposed to reading out vast swathes of material that we've already read. And I do need to stress that the Section 42A reports that have been prepared, the various statements of evidence and submissions and so forth, have all been pre-read by us. So we think we've got a pretty good handle on what it is you're wanting. And that's why we're asking people to keep fairly succinct in terms of highlighting, what the problems are and what they want to do about them. It's not helpful to us to have people read out, vast tracts of material that we've already read. What I also want to say, though, is that we certainly appreciate the fact that this may not be a forum that's familiar to a number of people, especially lay people. I see Mrs. Gore there, who we have dealt with a few times before, but it's going back a wee way. But there are a number of submitters that probably have never appeared at a hearing before, let alone one looking down the barrel of a computer screen. We just want to say about that is that all we're here to do is hear what you want to tell us. If we've got any questions, we'll ask, but the questions are designed so that we are clear in terms of what it is you're seeking, or if there's something that we don't understand, we've simply asked you to clarify that for us. We're not here to make people feel uncomfortable. we're here for people to, imagine that they're just having a conversation around what it is they want to see happen and why. And we're not going to, be like it is on television, like an episode of LA Law and, making people feel uncomfortable and putting them on the spot, because that's not the nature of things. So I think that's all I wanted to say by way of background, other than to really re-stress the fact of, please don't read out vast tracts of information that you sent to us. Please focus on what it is that you're wanting us to do, bearing in mind too that Mr. Bell will be able to put on the screen the map or the location of the particular properties that individual submitters will be talking to us about. So that will help us and perhaps help you too, just to put things in context a little bit. So what I might do now, I think, is ask the rest of the people that are here to please introduce themselves, including the council staff. And while you're doing that, if you do have any questions about the process that we're undertaking, please ask them at that point. I should also say that after we've done this round of introductions, if you're not speaking, if you're just observing until it's your turn to speak, if you could please turn your video and sound off, that just stops distractions in the background and so forth. So I think without further ado, if we could just go around the virtual room and have folk introduce themselves, please, that would be much appreciated.
Hello all, Fletcher here, District Plan Administrator and Hearings Coordinator for the Waikato District Council. Thanks.
Kia ora, Sandra Kelly, Senior Project Coordinator, District Plan.
Good afternoon, I'm Catherine Bolton. I am the Section 42A reporting officer. So I prepared the main report and the addendums and rebuttal for the rest of district, the wider area outside of Hamilton Fringe.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton.
Good afternoon, I'm Carolyn Red, Assistant Counsel.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Susanna Tate. I am the reporting officer for the Hamilton Fringe portion of the rest of district.
Thank you, Ms. Tate.
Hi, we're Chris and Andrew Gore. We're individual submitters.
Thank you, welcome.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wood here representing submitter 398 for Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Bevan Holbrook, planning witness for Diamond Creek Farms, appearing tomorrow.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Shaw from CKL. I'll be hearing tomorrow for Quigley and Voyle.
Thank you very much.
Laura Galt, Hamilton City Council, and I'll be appearing tomorrow.
Thanks, Ms. Galt.
Mark Arbuthnot and Bentley & Co. I'll be here tomorrow for Dilworth.
Thank you. Still got a couple more, I think. Mr. Lynch.
Hi, I'm Martin Lynch. I'm going to talk to a submission today.
Thank you. Welcome. And we've got someone on a cell phone by the look of it.
Hey, kia ora. My name's Dale Pitcher. I'm an individual submitter.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Pitcher. Sorry, I missed you there too.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have someone on a cell phone, 0274 555 157. On mute. There we go.
Hello, I'm Mark Smith. I'm appearing this afternoon. In terms of my own submission, I'm just driving back to Hamilton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Is that everybody?
I'm Lee Robke. I'm appearing for submitter 551 this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Robke. I was a bit confused because you had Lee up and we had Mr. Lee Shaw earlier on, and I wasn't sure if there were two connections,
Two Lees.
with two separate people, and pleased to say you are two separate people.
Yes.
All right, I think that's everything by way of introduction, and there's no questions that have arisen. As we've done in these hearings in the past, we start with the District Council reporting officers just giving us a précis of their individual Section 42A reports. They're the ones that you will have seen from the website and that you've made, in some cases, filed rebuttal evidence and so forth about. We've got an open mind as to whether Ms. Bolton or Ms. Tate go first. We'll leave that to you. And if we have any questions, we'll ask them at the end of your individual presentations. So we're in your hands.
I'm happy, excuse me, I'm happy to go first. It's Susanna Tate here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners and Submitters. Just to summarise, I guess, my Section 42 report, my rebuttal and my opening statement. The pressure to develop within the Hamilton Fringe has been consistently high for several decades now. This has resulted in the proliferation of rural residential development and the consequential fragmentation of rural land. The cumulative effects on infrastructure, loss of high-class soils and rural production and amenity is clearly evident and would only increase with the zoning of further land. In line with national, regional and local policy, I consider that a line needs to be drawn under the continued proliferation of urban-style development on rural land, especially in close proximity to Hamilton. With the exception of Melody Lane and the Atawhai Assisi site, I do not consider the various sites in question are so unique or can be satisfactorily differentiated from the wider area to overcome the precedent effects of rezoning them. With respect to Puketaha and Ruakura, there is a definite signalling by non-statutory strategic documents that rezoning in these areas may be appropriate in time, but I do not consider that further work, but I do consider that further work needs to be completed in order for land to be rezoned in these areas. And I'm not convinced that the district plan review is the appropriate vehicle to move these rezonings forward at this point. I'm happy to take any questions from the panel.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tate. Let's start with you, Ms. Gibb.
No, it was very clear, thank you, Ms. Tate. Your report was very good to follow. Thanks very much, no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Yeah, no, I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Marg?
You just won this, Tate, and thank you for what you've provided. When you say the plan is not the appropriate place to consider some of the submissions, what would you consider more appropriate?
That comment was specifically in relation to the Puketaha and Ruakura submissions. I think that the strategic documents in question, so the Metro Spatial Plan, they are reasonably infant in the statutory process, or they're not statutory documents. They would need to be brought into the regional policy statement. So I think that they should be pursued either through the future-proof, an update to the future-proof strategy, and then brought into the regional policy statement. And as I noted in my original report, the landowners, there are options now for landowners to pursue out-of-sequence developments. Excuse me. Effectively a Schedule 1 process, a plan change process, and they would have to present suitable information to support those rezonings, including land supply and infrastructural servicing.
Thank you for that.
Ms. Sedgwick,
No, that was helpful, but I have no questions. Thank you.
thank you. Did I ask you, Mr. Fulton, if you had any questions?
Yes, you did ask me.
I thought I did.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney.
Yes, and this is to both of you really. The question is the country living in village zones don't, given their nature, they don't fit easily into the NPSUD, do they? In terms of what that policy document is trying to achieve. Is that, I think that's the approach you've taken, is it? Sorry, on you.
I'll speak to that one first and then Catherine can have a go. No, I don't think that they do sit comfortably within the national policy statement. I think that they are completely counter to what the national policy statement is trying to achieve. Catherine may have something else to add.
But that doesn't in itself mean that you have to strictly follow the NPSUD, do you? You can simply look at that document, but it doesn't exclude the rezoning of country living or village zoning, does it?
I think that the country living zone or the village zone are perfectly legitimate zoning options under the national policy statement, but I don't think that the national policy statement envisages the proliferation of that zone, which I think we already have. And I think
it really focuses on capacity and creating well-functioning urban environments, doesn't it? But I suggest to you that that in itself doesn't exclude the rezoning of land to village or to country living in itself, if those zones are appropriate for other reasons. You know, the normal test, I think the Vineyard case or whatever it's called, sets out that criteria. Would you agree with that?
I think within an urban environment, the expectation is that land is well serviced, well planned, and I guess just to those 2 points, I don't think that the submissions to rezone land that we've received satisfy those 2 aspects. They fall outside urban limits, with the exception of some of the, I think there's 10 submissions in Matangi.
But you could get an argument, couldn't you, that look, we know this doesn't fit within the NPSUD, but given the nature of the site, given its location, given the fact that it may not have high class soils, it fulfills a demand for this type of larger sites. Therefore, it's appropriate to rezone that into country living or village. Is that an option we've got as well?
I think it's an option that you've got, but I'm not convinced that it would satisfy the direction given by the national policy statement. I don't think that the rezoning requests that we have would add significant capacity. They don't sit within defined urban limits, and they wouldn't be reticulated. But I do appreciate that there is a market demand for country living type development.
I think the Future Proof 2017 seems to, it identifies the towns and villages where urban growth should be directed. And also that rural residential living should be located in and around existing towns, villages and rural residential. Did you take that from the Future Proof 2017?
Yes, I did. But that there was another, if you bear with me for 2 seconds, please. My apologies. There was just something I wanted to add in there. Yes, I did pick up on the points that you've raised, but I didn't feel that the submissions that we've received satisfied the intent of Future Proof. And I'm looking for something to add to that, but I can't find it just at the moment. I can come back to that.
I take your point there. Okay, all right. At the moment, I don't think I've got any further questions, so thank you.
Just taking that a little bit further on in one particular aspect. The thrust of a lot of what you're saying is that there needs to be further work done at a higher policy level before definitive conclusions on some of these sorts of proposals can be addressed. If we took that approach across the board, though, doesn't that mean that district plans would forever be inappropriate? Because there's always other planning initiatives that are going on. We've got an obligation to look at this district plan on its merits based on the policy regime that exists at the moment. And if we were to say, well, you know, Future Proof's being revisited, the corridor north spatial plan is being looked at, can't really make any decisions on issues like that until that's completed, then we'd just suffer from inertia, wouldn't we? Aren't we obliged to look at the planning regime as it exists and make decisions accordingly?
I think on that basis, then Puketaha and Ruakura wouldn't stack up because they're not signalled in the regional policy statement. So
but that's not a I mean, and you've mentioned it. There's alternative land release scenarios, and we've issued a decision on Ohiniwai that says, you know, Future Proof isn't a straitjacket. You know, it's not something that's, and I'm not saying that you're necessarily saying that either, but it's not a straitjacket that says, unless you comply with the very strict zoning maps and ignore the alternative land release scenarios and so forth. I just want to pose the question a little bit and wonder whether you may be, and give you a chance to respond, being particularly focused on the future-proof maps and the urban limits requirements, and perhaps not giving quite enough attention to the alternative land release provisions. Do you have a comment on that?
I think in terms of an alternative land release, there's been inadequate information presented with respect to Puketaha and Ruakura to consider them for rezoning at this time. I think there's too many key effects that haven't been considered. So, and with respect to Matangi, I guess would be the other location that I guess plays into your question. I appreciate what you're saying, but I guess my position is that the future proof exists for a reason, to ensure that development is well planned and coordinated and meets the needs of the community. And I'm not convinced that, I haven't been convinced by submissions that rezoning at Matangi would achieve the best outcomes.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then you're not so much saying that it's necessarily inappropriate, you're saying that there's not sufficient evidence to justify alternative land release given the criteria that Future Proof sets out? Is that a fair summary?
No, I do think that they're inappropriate. I don't think that they pass the policy test laid out by the MPS and the RPS.
But we've just had a conversation about alternative land release strategy. What is it other than this very pointed view that says Future Proof isn't a framework? You seem to be saying it's a straitjacket. And I don't mean to be pejorative in saying it's a straitjacket. And I'm keen to understand why you say that it doesn't meet the policy requirement when there are alternative land release strategies.
Well, I think the national policy statement points to alternative land release where it adds significant capacity. I don't think that any of the submissions outside of Puketaha and Ruakura would add significant capacity. And in the absence of, well, in addition, I guess, to my concern about the policy test, not on every rezoning submission there has been some technical information produced, but I think on the whole there's a lack of information.
Okay,
Particularly talking about the cumulative effects and the precedent effect, which no one's touched on.
How does rezoning something in a district plan review as opposed to a plan change create any precedent? Resource consents create precedent. But if you're saying that the precedent is that country living or village zone is a consequence of a district plan review, that's not a precedent.
I think in the case of some country living requests that have been made, I don't think there would be a defensible boundary other than the Melody Lane Arawhai CC site. I think it would open the door, maybe not for plan changes, but for resource consents who could lean on a rezoning decision and say, why was the boundary drawn there?
Okay, Mr. Kearney, did you want to follow that up?
Yeah, just for example, just following through on this discussion, I've sort of read from the Future Proof 2017, and I've just quoted it here, that rural residential living should be located in and around existing towns, villages, and rural residential nodes, and should not result in fragmentation of high-class soils. Now, I haven't got the quote paragraph for that, but I sort of picked that up from Future Proof.
Mm-hmm.
You take a place like Matangi, as I understand it's got existing country living around that particular area, and I think we've got a few submitters who say, well, we should extend those boundaries to accommodate our land, and so that debate really stands or falls on whether it's appropriate to do that. Isn't that what we're tasked with, rather than, as the chair says, that you've got a strict straitjacket approach to the Future Proof study and the policy statement?
My evidence has relied less on future proof. I've placed my focus on the national policy statement and the regional policy statement, and obviously to a lesser extent the proposed local policy. And the district plan has to give effect to those documents. So while they might be considered stringent and unaccommodating, there is a legal requirement to give effect to those documents.
But by taking a broader view, you can't be said to be not giving effect to those documents, can you? If you've got to consider, for example, a request to rezone land into country living that adjoins an existing country living zone, how could that be contrary to the NPS or the policy statement?
There's a focus on both documents about on being planned and well coordinated, resilient, and I don't consider that the country living zone achieves any of those things. There's no, except for the Matangi urban limits, I guess planned development would be any development that occurs within urban limits. And those urban limits are being refined continually by reviews to future proof, which would then come into the RPS. I don't think that the RPS is an inflexible document. I think it is designed to be, it is updated regularly, but I don't think that the information, I don't think that future proof in other documents, I think they still rely heavily on this idea of planned and coordinated.
Yeah, okay. I suppose we're trying to direct the conversation or discussion is that outside those documents, we still have a discretion to consider an application on its merits. I think that's where I'm sort of driving to, taking into account all the issues. Okay, thank you.
No, and I don't have any questions. Thank you, Ms. Tate. Does the panel have anything that might have arisen from that conversation that they'd like to ask about? Would appear not. So, Ms. Bolton, please.
I'm Mr. Chair. I couldn't get myself off mute in time.
Sorry.
I just wanted perhaps a clarification around the difference between, for example, Matangi and Puketaha and Ruakura. That's much closer to the Hamilton boundary, because there is commentary about that urban expansion zone, particularly right there by Puketaha and Ruakura, and I wondered if there was some extra thinking that went in around that as opposed to Matangi.
So in Puketaha, there was a submission within the urban expansion area, and I didn't have any concerns about, I guess where my consideration focused was more around the timing of bringing that residential zoning online. And I think prior to the strategic planning work being undertaken, I didn't consider it was appropriate to rezone land within the urban expansion area. And that's certainly the direction of the proposed plan, which has a prohibited status on subdivision and a non-complying status on a number of activities. I think with regards to the Burton block in Puketaha, there was, well, I guess first and foremost, there was a big lack of information to consider the rezoning or even the future urban zoning of that site. But I do appreciate that. So from a policy perspective, it was very difficult to consider the submission beyond what I did in my report. And Ruakura was the same.
Yes, I note that there was a couple of references to the strategic agreement between Hamilton City Council and Waikato District Council, and there was an acknowledgement that that's now gone on to, instead of a date, but trigger points. And I was just curious to know how much influence that had on your decisions.
None. Excuse me. I think it's made the strategic agreement more responsive, but it didn't have a bearing on my recommendations.
All right, no, that's good. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tate. Ms. Bolton?
So good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners and submitters. As we've discussed earlier, my area covers the rest of the district, the area outside of townships and Hamilton Fringe area. The submissions for rezoning received largely related to increasing a density on sites, so rezoning from rural land to country living or to village zoned land. There were some seeking residential land or industrial, but these were more in the minority. In my report, because it covered such a wide area, I focused on the relief sought by the submissions, basically what zone they were seeking, or I separated out the submissions where they were provided with a lot more information and evidence, or they covered a larger area of rezoning. So my report covered two areas of rezoning within Glen Massey. You'll see in my report that I came to different recommendations for these two areas of land. One was to reject the rezoning request, and the other was to rezone. I recommended to rezone to village zone. There was a request to rezone land at Te Uku near Raglan, and again, submitters seeking rezone from rural to country living to village. A rezone request to industrial zone. That's to recognise an existing industrial activity at Mason Road. And then there were some rezone requests to cover some specific purpose zones, or to cover the existing uses on site, such as at Dilworth School. So what do we have here? So really, my report was focused, or my analysis was focused on the framework report, and taking into consideration the conferencing as well, which really directed that a top-down approach be considered. So I looked at things, and we've had quite a bit of discussion with Suze just now about those higher order documents and things like the regional policy statement, future proof, and then down to the proposed district plan. So really, that's just a bit of an overview of what I looked at in my reports, and I'm happy to take questions now.
I think it would be helpful. I mean, you've overviewed what it is that you've considered. Your summary statement does set out in a little bit of detail the those particular submissions that you've commented on. And I think to set the scene for what follows, I think it would be helpful for you to take us through those, please.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I'll start with the analysis of submissions at Glen Massey. So as I mentioned before, there were two rezoning request sites at Glen Massey. One is further away from the township, though, and it's in the rural zone at present. It did have a subdivision consent over the land for 18 lots, I understand. That subdivision consent has since lapsed. There was a variety of submissions, a number of submissions for the rezone request there. Largely requesting country living zone, but I understand village zone as well. Now the other rezone request in that area was for 859 Wangara Road. Excuse me if I pronounce things incorrectly. Now this one I found, my recommendation was different for this one. And this one is because it already is zoned under the proposed district plan as country living zone over a large part of it, but the zone has reduced in size between the operative district plan and the proposed district plan. So what the submitters ended up requesting for the site was that that a village zone, well, that the land be rezoned to village, and that's over the smaller land area that had been notified under the proposed district plan. So this area here was covered in the Glen Massey structure plan area. There is the land in it has been identified as, you know, a key move for residential expansion in that area, which is one of the reasons why I recommended that the rezoning to village occur. So the submissions came in for, well, one submission from Diamond Creek Farm Limited came in for the rezoning of land at Tiuku. This is near quite a small existing village where there's a school and some other facilities in the area. So the my recommendation for this one was it falls outside of any growth area, so outside of future-proof, indicative village growth areas, and for that reason I recommended that the submission be rejected. Now I haven't, in my overview, I haven't gone into the number of different submissions that were received for country living or village zone. There are a number of them and they are set out in my report. Again, these rezoning requests are for land that is, it really falls outside of any growth area. It's largely not located close to you know, a village or township, but that's not completely the case for all. Okay, so going on to the submission at 111 and 117 Mason Road. They have an existing industrial activity at the site. It's been going for some time, I'm not sure how long, and I understand that there is existing resource consents in place. So this submission site, it is located within a growth area, but the proposed district plan has not sought to rezone any of the surrounding land to a higher density, to residential or to industrial or anything like that. So my recommendation for that submission was that it retain its rural zoning and be reliant on the provisions of the rural zone. Because if it is rezoned, it becomes a bit of a spot zone out on itself. And moving along to Maramarua Township, the submission was very unclear about what was really sought. So they sought, they wanted encouragement of the township to be developed as a service centre, but they didn't outline what zoning was that was requested, or specific sites that they are looking to be rezoned. So based on its location outside of growth areas, but also the level of information that was provided, I recommended that this submission be rejected. So next I received 2 submissions for rezoning of land at Gordonton, 1002 and 1012 Gordonton Road. These parcels of land are located within indicative village limits, I understand, and the site at 1002 Gordonton Road is already of a residential zone size. It's consistent with the other, it's up in front of us now, so it's consistent with the other sites around it, and it's already been developed. So basically I recommended that this rezoning request be accepted, because it really reflects the status quo situation. And then there is the area of land to the rear. Initially, this submission came in with a lot of information for the rezoning to residential. They have come in with a bit more, and it really, I think, at this time, I think that the decision on this parcel of land is finally balanced, and if the panel do want to see some, I guess, incremental changes to the zoning in this area, then you know, this is something that I probably wouldn't be opposed to. So then there is the rezoning at Oheniwai. Now the panel, obviously you have a lot of background in these rezoning requests, and I note that the decision on Oheniwai has, for hearing 19, has recently been released. So basically this is looking at the future urban zone sought by Oheniwai Lands Limited. And yeah, I understand the panel have quite a bit of background on that one. So then I guess covering just some of the perhaps more straightforward submissions received, submissions seeking retention of the notified zones, and then submissions which relate to mapping errors, which have really been confirmed by the council in questioning from myself, and which seems logical that these submissions at Scotsman Valley Road, at River Road, that they have come about through mapping errors. And then I have the submissions at made by Borock, so next to Tauwhare Village, where they've sought either country living or village zone. This one is larger, near a larger village, but still outside of any identified growth areas, which is why my recommendation came to reject that submission. And then we've had submissions by Dilworth School, and that's basically to recognise and provide specific provisions in the district plan to recognise the existing school activities at that site. And then K Road by Andrew and Christine Gore, who I understand are here today. And this is the rezoning of their property from rural zone to country living zone. This property is really located within Hamilton Fringe area. But as I was looking at an addendum report, I have addressed this, and it is very close to other submissions that I have looked at. This submission site is located under the urban expansion area overlay and falls outside of growth areas. So that's my extended overview.
That's very helpful, thank you. Let's see if there's any questions, Ms. Bolton. Can we start with you, please, Ms. Cedric?
I have no questions right at the moment, but thank you.
Mr. Marg?
Yeah, look, thank you, Ms. Bolton, and I note that your reasoning is probably not too dissimilar, where certain submissions have been rejected and following the national, I guess the NPSUD and regional policy statement, the lack of three waters infrastructure and policy 8 being the #1 things, and of course high-class soils. But I guess I just want to go back to 223 Wilton Colliers Road in Glen Massey and 859 Wangaro Road, Glen Massey. If I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've rejected Wilton Colliers and previously it had a zone apply, but it lapsed. That's correct, isn't it? It had zoning, but because I didn't do anything in the time frame with that land. Is that correct?
They had resource consent, they had subdivision consent to undertake basically a country living zone style development. I think it was for 18 lots, and they'll be able to address this tomorrow, I think. But and I understand that 2 stages were completed, but the remainder of the subdivision has lapsed and has been lapsed for some time now.
Correct. So based on the 29 hectares that they're wanting to obviously continue with, can I just understand why you've rejected it again? Why you have rejected this?
I've rejected this one because it falls outside of those growth areas.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah, no, that's okay. No further questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
Just following on, thank you, from Commissioner Marg. So it's outside the growth areas, but it would be right next to the recommended parcel of land that you're talking about on Glen Massey Road, Wainaro Road. Wainaro Road. So it was, I know the topography of that land is perhaps challenging. So the existing part of the subdivision that's lapsed, the bit that they did do, where exactly is that on the map so that I can get that in relativity? Does it show on that map? It's in your report?
I think it's up the top
of Wilton Collieries Road.
Yeah.
So that's isolated as it is. Then if there's a piece of land between that and the parcel of land coming off Wainaro Road. So the original work that they did to subdivide, they started further up Wilton Collieries and then there's a gap. Is that right?
Yeah, I will need to confirm that, but that is what I understand. I guess I want to note that the zoning in this area has had quite a bit of a complex history, and you may have seen in my report there's various kind of zoning maps. So the operative district plan country living zone, it extended it extended to the boundary of, the legal boundaries of those sites. Whereas under the proposed district plan, there's quite an area of change in that country living zone. It doesn't extend to the boundary. I guess it's a little bit floating within its existing site that it's in.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is get a bigger picture of the area, and I do know the area because it actually is in my ward, of my councillor ward. But I know it's challenging out there, but I'm just trying to get a bigger picture of where the settlements are and where this rural land is around, in the middle somehow of these settlements. Does that make sense? So we might have to look at that a little bit more in detail later. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton.
Yes, just one question, and this is for me, the interest is in the applications for further urban zones or future urban zones. And I know the Ohinawai ones you've rejected, but if we did zone land for future urban expansion, what is your view on what happens then to that land? If we place that a qualification on it, does that then give people an indication that it will happen, or does it just does it make it more valuable? For instance, if they wanted to sell it because it had a urban zone expansion on it, what's your view on that? Does it affect it or not?
I guess I can't really, my expertise is not on the value of land. I would think it probably would place a bit of a higher value on land, because there would be some kind of expectation that, that the zoning would follow in the future. But I guess it kind of, the valuation or cost of land falls outside my area.
That's fine. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kearney.
I think you heard the debate I had with Ms. Tate. Do you want to make some comments on that? I think the point I was really discussing was that the NPSUD is all about providing capacity for well-functioning urban environments, but it doesn't exclude our ability to consider country living zones and village living zones on their merits in terms of whether they're appropriate strategically and all that in the context of the planning documents. Do you want to just comment on that?
No, I don't. I don't think it rules you out from considering anything along those lines. But I do think that that the types of zoning submissions that I have received are really largely for country living zone or village zone. So they're the lower density, type of development. Whereas I think, that type of development isn't necessarily providing, large amount of capacity in an area that should potentially be capable of, providing for a denser development, say for a residential zoned density. So when you're looking at areas around townships or around within indicative village areas as shown in Future Proof, I think that there is some reasonable degree of flexibility to look outside or just on the edges of those areas, but those areas might be more appropriately developed to a higher density rather than the country living or the village zoned sites.
So what you're saying is that when we look at the application, the submissions on their merits, we take into account the strategic policy intent in the various strategic documents that we got before us. Is that generally what the approach you've taken?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what Susanna mentioned before is that we're looking to have well-planned, coordinated developments. So, that's looking at things like, can they be serviced? It's in those higher density areas that's more likely to be occurring. Are they going to be integrated? All those types of things.
And the ones that fall outside the identified urban towns and villages, what's your view on that?
Well, I think again, as Susanna mentioned, these documents are in place to try and stop I guess ad hoc development and to try and consolidate development into certain areas where it's been identified as this looks like a good place for development to go for, can be serviced, or it can be looked into further. So when you're starting to look outside of those areas, and they can't necessarily be serviced, and they might be I guess dividing up, that high value soils areas, is that really going to be creating planned development that's achieving the things that you want to be seeing for the area? So
okay, yeah, thank you. I can understand your approach. Thank you.
Just one, and it's a question of clarification, Ms. Bolton. The industrial proposed rezoning at Mason Road and Whatawhata, what's the nature of the activity that's being undertaken on that site?
Now, I'll have to confirm this, but I think from memory, I think it was a timber yard. Yeah, timber yard.
And if you're saying it's got an existing resource consent, so leave it rural and the consent can look after things. Let's say they wanted to do something a little bit different on that site, but still being a timber yard. They might want to increase the intensity or something of that nature. Under the rural provisions in the plan, what would the activity status of that application be?
So I understand, well, no decision has been made on the rural plan yet.
As proposed.
But as proposed, I understand my colleague, Mr. Cleese, put forward a restricted discretionary activity status for looking at matters for, looking at rural industry activities. So, you'd be looking at, are the effects appropriate for what's within the surrounding area? Is it appropriate to expand? Is the rural industrial activity kind of characteristic of those types of activities that you'd expect to see within the area? I'm not entirely sure of the matters of discretion put forward, but those are the things I would imagine would be seen.
Do you know how long that facility's been operating as a rural industry or as a timber yard? Is it has it arisen during the course of the last the operative district plan, or does it predate that and go back quite a long ways?
I'm uncertain. I do think it is very well established. I think it has been there for quite some time. I haven't seen the actual resource consents myself, but I can't 100% confirm on that.
Okay. Doesn't it make sense though for zoning to sort of follow long established land use patterns, and to say to somebody that's been operating a particular activity on a site for, by the sound of it, some considerable time, what's the harm in actually saying, well, you're providing employment, it doesn't appear to on its face to have been a problem for anybody, and that you want to codify that by recognizing that if they want to do something a little different, the district plan recognises that within appropriate limits. And I take the point that if it was RD and the matters of discretion were you know, about effects, that still happens. But what's the crime in saying this site has been industrial for yonks, and we'll recognise that in the plan?
I mean, I don't necessarily think that rezoning the site would be a bad thing to do, but I do think that you know, when you've got resource consents in place and you've got these conditions that, you know, they need to, I guess, work towards or work within, and then you rezone, and then you might not necessarily have those restrictions in place, and then that can potentially open up effects beyond what's existing.
And this submission hasn't provided anything concrete as to how or why, other than the general submission that says we're industrial and we think it should continue to, be zoned that way. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Bolton. That's very helpful. Which I think brings us on to our submitters. And the first one is Mr. Wood on behalf of Mr. Thomas, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I think my video is blocked by the host. Here we go. Thank you, Fletcher. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Woods. I'm a planner here to present evidence in regards to, or summary of evidence in regards to the submission made on behalf of I&C Thomas, submitter number 398. So I do have a highlights package, but apologies, I'll read from that, but I did not make it through to the panel in time. But in essence, I will give a brief summary of the evidence presented to date in my primary evidence and also my rebuttal, and happy to have and answer questions following that.
Is Mr. Thomas has filed a statement personally. Are we taking that as read?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the portion of lands which the submission relates is located in Matangi. It is bounded by the railway line, Tauwhare Road, an arterial road, and State Highway 1B. It's an area of approximately 25 hectares, and the submission point is for a general area of land rather than the submitter's own land in the interest of good planning practice. The site is predominantly approximately 70 to 80% located within the regional policy statement and future-proof urban limits maps. And the current council recommendation is to retain rural zoning for the entirety of the site. The submission seeks to rezone the land to be country living zone as the primary objective. In the alternative, a residential, or in light of 42A reports completed to date, future urban zoning would be considered appropriate. The submission seeks to enable rural residential use of the site in the area at a density and scale that is commensurate with the existing environment. And in my opinion, rezoning of this land would achieve good consistency with the Matangi Dairy Factory rezoning proposals, which seeks to enable additional jobs, additional commerce and employment, but without any corresponding enabling provision for housing in the village. The infrastructure demand is limited to transport and reserves and communities with the country living zone proposal. Each of those are equitably levied through development contributions. In my opinion, the key evidence presented to date is the fact that the site cannot be sustainably used for the zoned purpose. And there is evidence from AgFirst to concur with this. The site is simply uneconomic for rural activities. The existing density of rural residential activities in the submission area is 1 dwelling per 1.6 hectares. The zoning, in my opinion, and is also in agreement with the Section 42A report, is that a country living zone would be consistent with the regional policy statement and future-proof in this locality within urban limits. It provides additional housing capacity to an existing village. And whilst residential or future urban might be a nice outcome to resolve the zoning with, it's unlikely, in my opinion, to be realised within a reasonable planning horizon. And I think also of interest is the recent updating, I guess, of the Hamilton City Waikato District strategic agreement around land within Tamahere and inside the Waikato Expressway at the very start of Matangi Road. Hamilton City has obviously recently decided that they no longer would like that land to come into their boundaries. So as the crow flies, Matangi is approximately 4 to 5 kilometres from that location. So that's 4 to 5 kilometres further out than a country living zone, which has been resolved to be acceptable to both Hamilton City and Waikato District, at least as far as the reports have come to date. So the key issues that we would like to resolve would be that the Section 42A report states that the country living zone is not appropriate because this precludes future urbanisation and expansion of Hamilton City. That there is a lack of existing and planned infrastructure, and this renders the land unlikely to be suitable for residential or future urban. In my opinion, these issues can be resolved through a country living zone, which doesn't, in my opinion, at the scale identified, preclude urbanisation, given that urban development is not foreseeable within any reasonable planning horizon, in my opinion, and that urban infrastructure is not proposed nor required. My key concern with the Section 42 report in this current environment is that it resolves that there should be no growth of the village. And just to wrap up my summary, the rural zone as proposed is, in my opinion, inappropriate and not a sustainable use of the land. Growth in this existing village should be enabled. Conversely, if the existing proposed framework is retained, it is expressly prohibited, so a resource consent cannot be applied for. And the country living zone, in my opinion, does not preclude future urbanisation of Matangi, given its likely planning horizons for urban development, and also previous examples from Hamilton City to expand into such areas if it ever were to become the case. So that is my highlights package. On behalf of Submitter 398, I'm more than happy to field questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Marg?
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Very helpful, but I have no questions of you.
Ms. Sedgwick?
Thank you. Just wondering how many lots could be developed on this land, please?
Based on the numbers, I haven't done a subdivision analysis of the whole circa 25 hectares, but given the existing density of one dwelling per 1.6 hectares, I do believe the numbers are in my original evidence, which I don't have at hand, but you could expect 2 to 3 times the existing density, assuming the country living zone provisions of one dwelling per 5,000 square metres.
And currently surrounding it is rural or country living?
It is rural on the north, east and south sides, and to the west of the railway line, there's the existing dairy factory site and some living zone.
Right, okay. And I note you say that there is a metered water connection. That's to the south.
Correct.
Yes, but no wastewater.
Correct.
Okay, good. No, that's good. Thank you very much.
Ms. Gibb?
I just would like clarity, thank you. So is it currently being used as a runoff or is it just dry stock grazing?
So referring to the original submission of Mr. Thomas, he runs dry stock on the farm with high feed supplements and also the evidence of AgFirst as well. So basically maintaining approximately 3 stock per hectare on average across the site.
Yes, I'm just looking at that now, and yeah, and the suggestion is it's not sustainable. That's what you're saying as a farming unit.
Yeah, referring to his evidence, he loses money operating it in the way he likes to operate it with dry stock.
Okay, thanks. I've no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Yes, could you tell me how long the Thomases owned this piece of land? Are you aware?
They've got 2 titles there. They moved to Matangi in 2008 and then acquired the neighbouring property, which is approximately 4.5 hectares, I believe, of 2009, 2010. And that was vacant at the time, but has currently got a rural residential dwelling being established on it.
Okay, so that being the case, it was possibly uneconomic when they bought it. And I mean, to use the reason or part of the reason now to say it's uneconomic doesn't hold up very well, does it?
Well, without bringing the economic position of the purchase reasons into the equation, whether it was uneconomic now or previously, I get the impression it hasn't changed from the evidence presented. It was probably uneconomic at that point in time, and the reasons for purchase were not for it to be a productive rural unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney?
So there's no country living zone around this particular block, is there?
Correct. There is actually no country living zone in Matangi itself at the moment,
okay.
Nor proposed.
Okay. And the soils on this property?
I think off the top of my head, referring back to the AgFirst report, highly likely class 1 or class 2.
Highly likely to be, yeah, class.
Most definitely, yeah. I don't think there's any question about the soil quality of the underlying land.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose just asking the elephant in the room question. Wouldn't it mean, just looking at can you see the map on the screen?
Yes.
And the property that you're referring to is accurately shown as that red sort of, what would you call it, J-shaped piece of land. Is that accurate?
Correct, but the submission originally made includes all the land up to Towhare Road on the northwest, the railway line in the southwest, and Mary Church Road, which is State Highway 1B.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because on that basis, leaving aside scale, you'd say that then integrated with the existing village, insofar as it abutted it and then expanded it to the northeast.
Yes, that was, oh, sorry.
No, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, yes, that was the reason for the submission rather than just pick an individual title.
Yeah, and there's a logic to that. What's the state of play with those various landowners, though? I mean, it's one thing to suggest that it be rezoned. It's another thing to impose a zoning on someone's property that you don't own, or to suggest that be happening. Is there any formal agreement between the Thomases and those other property owners about rezoning?
There's no formal agreement to my knowledge. I do know that it has been at least discussed as a neighbour conversation across the fence with all of the people in the submission area, but nothing further than that I can add.
Okay. All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you. Thanks very much for your evidence.
Thank you.
And that brings us to Mr. and Mrs. Gore, please, noting that we do have the legal submissions that were filed by Mr. Davies. I understand Mr. Davies isn't here unless he's joined in the last little bit. Are we just to take those as read? Is that the intention? And you'll just present your evidence and rebuttal evidence and so forth. Is that how you're proposing to proceed?
Refer to those submissions.
Sorry, Mrs. Gore, for whatever reason, I missed the start of what you said. Would you mind just saying that again, please?
Yes, you are correct. we'll just be referring our summations to those submissions from council.
All right, thank you. Just when you're ready, thanks.
So just to recap where our land is, the 4 hectares of land off K Road. Our request is to rezone our current rural land to country living. The proposed district plan seeks to retain it as rural land. This land is affected by the UEA, which limits the site's potential, and it unreasonably encumbers our development rights, and it doesn't represent effective land use in our opinion. And it doesn't represent a sustainable management of the land to hold it in a holding pattern with nothing happening. Under the policy 3 of the NPSUD, it does require an urban form to be commensurate with relative demand. Well, the land at the moment cannot be used reasonably for the uses anticipated in the rural zone, because it's been fragmented from any sort of rural connection. And the site is fragmented when compared to the equivalent land sizes in the same zone. Country living would have development more in keeping with the site features, like the neighbouring lifestyle blocks and the neighbouring farms. The rezone would largely be consistent with the Waikato Regional Plan, and it raises questions of reasonableness, like there are no long-term goals for the future of this piece of land to date, despite the fact that the UEA has been in existence for some time. And that also raises questions around sustainable management, because we believe if we have it rezoned, we can sustainably manage that area into the future. For example, as was mentioned in the submission, that land in Rototuna was country living blocks, and they have since been now turned into high density city living. So it wouldn't impede any development into the future. And
currently the land's not able to be used effectively as farmland. There's currently between K Road and Resolution Drive and the expressway, there's currently no farm animals, nor are there likely to be farm animals in the future, because it's impractical and extraordinarily difficult to utilise farm animals in this area. There's only a minor proportion of this land can actually be cropped. So there's very little farming use that this land can be put to. And it's really unacceptable that this land stays in an unusable state for 25 years. Much of this land will return to wasteland if that's the case, because it can't be grazed and most of it can't be cropped. So realistically, we think that going to a country living zone is a more efficient use of land. And we think it's holding this land in limbo for 25 years, we think is just not a very practical nor sensible use of this land.
And in conjunction with that, we've been planning on the land environmentally for some time with extensive plantings and revegetations. And our view is that if it was a less densely urbanised piece of land, we can take that into account, that we've been looking after this land and trying to return it to a more natural environment with less urbanisation, but some provision for urbanisation as is needed. We can preserve some of the special character of this land that's already there. And we're already seeing a return of wildlife into this piece of land, and we value that and think into the future that other people do as well. And that's really the summation of our submission.
All right, thank you. And that point of view is pretty consistent with what you told us previously, albeit some considerable time ago, one of our very early hearings. So I think we've got a pretty good understanding of the situation you're in. let's see if we do have any questions for you though. Could we start with you, Mr. Fulton, please?
Yes, thank you. We're aware of the HT2 area that's will go into Hamilton City, and you're very close to that border. And you will also know the reasons for that. And obviously Hamilton City don't want subdivision taking place in land that's going to be urbanised in the very near future. So is that the understanding that you have for that as well?
Well, not really, because we've been told that it won't be urbanised for another 25 years. And I think that's a critical issue here, is that 25 years is an unacceptable time period. It's not effective use of land to have land going waste for 25 years.
It's not the understanding I have, that 25 years. However, that's maybe your understanding, but
well, we've been told in the staff, well, maybe it's 24 years, but 2045 is what we've been told, as we're expected that it will be urbanised, and that's far too long to make an area wasteland effectively. It's not being used at the moment. It's not. I mean, apart from the fact that there's some people living in houses on it, there's no effective farming happening.
Okay,
and it's not a valid criticism to say that it can't be urbanised, because we've seen already in the Rototuna district that that's exactly what happened. It was a country living, and then within 25 years it became urbanised.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Gibb?
Yes, I'd just like to point out that I think those dates that you're referring to may have been in a previous agreement, and now it's changed to be a trigger point as opposed to a date. But of course, the trigger point may not be for 25 years. I don't know what the triggers would be. So you are already starting to replant native plants, and you're seeing the return of bird life. Can you not just continue to do that while it's zoned rural?
Well, we can, but it's not effective use of farmland. I mean, part of the whole argument of all the national rules and laws is to make effective use of land. That's the whole reason why we're here, is we're trying to decide what is effective use of land. It's not acceptable to have land being unused for 25 years.
But also, in conjunction with that, we have actually fenced off quite a large portion of the land for that planting, knowing that to provision it into the future, and we'd like to preserve that for some type of urbanisation. But we are actually quite opposed to high density urbanisation into all proposed land. Like, there's a nice character of land, and we think it all gets lost unless there's some consideration for a different approach in some areas to retain natural character, the natural form of the land. It's sort of got quite hills, and then it goes into a valley, which we are replanting, and that can stay, like all that planting.
Okay, just I get it now. So you don't want it to end up being residential, but you don't want it to stay rural farmland. You'd like something in the middle. So
yeah.
I understand now. Thanks very much.
Yes, because there's no potential for rural farming.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick?
Thank you. Just expanding on the question by Councillor Fulton, Commissioner Fulton. I'm just trying to balance up the statements that the housing need is not likely until 2045. But on the other hand, you're saying that the Section 42A report talking about a future urban zone doesn't meet the immediate need for housing. And I'm wondering on what you're basing that immediate need for housing conclusion on.
Only on the current zoning we have. If we are to remain rural, then the land's not needed for housing immediately. It'll remain rural. But with all of the readings and the participation with this, we can see there is a demand for housing, and that's on a national basis, that there is housing demand. So we were prepared to compromise our more environmental focus of our land and say, yes, we would like some development, but we want it less intensive than high urbanisation. We'd like to meet the need for some people.
So you're saying, in your opinion, there is a need?
Yes, there isn't. Well, we can see there's a need.
Jacinda keeps telling us that there is.
Yeah,
Jacinda says there's a need for housing, and I guess nationally that's a fairly obvious thing. I don't think anybody disputes that. I think what we're saying here is that we have some land that's effectively going to become wasteland. Let's make some sensible use of it in an interim period until it becomes urban.
And how many lots would that be as country living?
The most likely scenario would be 8.
Right. Lovely. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Mr. Mark.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Cooney.
Mr. and Mrs. Gore, from memory, you acquired this land as an exchange block, did you? With NZTA?
We didn't exchange it as such. We were relocated to this by NZTA. Yes.
So they said, well, here we want your land, your other land,
yes,
but here's a block that we're prepared to give to you, or we can give you compensation.
No, they didn't offer compensation. It was a like for like. It was a land. Here's land similar to land you already own, and here you are.
Okay. And how long ago was that?
15 years ago. We've lived on this piece for 10 years. It took us 5 years to complete the transactions and build the house. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, and I don't have any questions. I don't think. Thank you both. What you're seeking and the reasons for it are pretty clear. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
We're a little bit ahead of time. Is Mr. Robke still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Are you? We might just carry on and hear from you, please.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think there's Martin and Stephanie Lynch.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're quite right. My mistake. Sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Lynch.
Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. I got ahead of myself, noting that the Section 42A report authors have recommended that the zoning on your property be returned to what it was in the operative plan, and I just put a tick by that in my memory. So I apologise for missing you out.
Thank you very much. Yes, I won't take too much of your time, but I did want the opportunity to just walk through the steps of what happened.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So it's just myself on behalf of Stephanie talking to you today. So we're at 2044 River Road, which is opposite the Horsham Downs Golf Course.
Yeah.
In July 2018, we received a letter from council advising a zone change of our property from country living to rural. We were really surprised and also quite distressed given that council had approved our country living zone status over 10 years ago at a full council process. And that was in recognition of the, in recognition of the change in the use of land that had already occurred at that point in time. We were not able to discover from council why this zone change was proposed in relation to our specific property. Over that 10 years, the character and amenity of our land and our neighbours west, northwest, south and southeast has all been developed significantly. So if anything, we're certainly very much more country living. We made a decision to oppose the zoning change and submitted this to council. Subsequent to that submission, we also then decided that we would apply for a subdivision consent of our property for up to 5 lots under the operative plan, and this was granted by council in 2020. The report prepared by Catherine Bolton on the 16th of April 2021 investigated our submission, and Catherine reported the following. I queried council over the reasons why this land has been rezoned to rural under the proposed district plan, and was advised this downzoning was an error. Catherine also noted that our next door neighbours' quarter acre section had also been downzoned in error as well. And also that the sites were in keeping with country living zone and not rural zone. And given that the rezoning was an error, recommended that our property and the neighbours should retain our status, as it were. It is it's a relief to get formal advice and understanding as to why we received that notification back in 2018. It's sort of been hanging over us a little bit. And given what has happened and that our property is consented for subdivision, we trust that the zoning of our property will remain as country living. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. That's very clear, and obviously it's put you through the ringer a little bit, but at least it would appear, at least on its face, to have been addressed in the Section 42A report. I think the situation's pretty clear cut, but let's see if there are any questions for you. Can we start with you, Mr. Marg, please?
No, it's pretty simple. The error has occurred and it's been corrected. That's the most important thing.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
No, thank you.
Ms. Gibb?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Ms. Sedgwick?
And nothing from me, thank you.
Did I say Ms. Gibb? No, I didn't. Ms. Gibb?
No, it's all good.
Mr. Cooney?
No, thank you.
No, I don't have any questions either, Mr. Lynch. Thank you, and apologies again for skipping you before.
No problems.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Robke, please.
Good afternoon. I'm here to present my highlights package on behalf of submitter 551. That's Dinah Robke and the estate of John Robke. Understand you have my highlights package in front of you.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, so that just covers the relevant part of my of the submission, a summary of the key points that were made in my evidence in chief, and a response to the two, what I consider relatively minor matters raised in the Section 42A report. So turning firstly to my evidence, basically the evidence to support the rezoning request, I took on board the feedback or the directions from the panel about having evidence. So I engaged a geotechnical engineer to have a look at the site to assess its suitability for zoning from country living to village zone. That report is attached to my evidence in chief, attachment 6. I won't go into the details around that, but essentially the findings were summarised in that page 2 of the highlights package. They're basically along the lines that the land is able to be serviced and it's suitable for village zone standards. I also refer in the highlights package to a report commissioned by the council. Rather ironically, in 2015, the report was from Tonkin and Taylor, and that report concluded that ecological flooding and overall development constraints on the land were low, and that's attached to my evidence in chief as attachment 5. I also attached in my evidence a map of the soils of Glen Massey, and unfortunately, unlike Matangi, the soils around Glen Massey are not class 1 or 2. Just in terms of the Section 42A report, I'm pleased to be able to say that, in my opinion, the conclusions reached in that report are robust and justifiable. And I say this with reference back to my evidence in chief, where I noted in the summary that rezoning the land in Glen Massey from country living to village zone would not be inconsistent with RPS directions. The soils subject to the submission are not high quality. The land subject to the submission is suitable to development down to village zone standards. that rezoning to village zone would not be inconsistent with the relevant objectives and policies of the proposed plan. And lastly, that rezoning to village zone would not be inconsistent with future-proof directions. I note that there were two relatively minor matters raised in the Section 42A report, access off Woolton Collieries Road, and secondly, adjacent land uses, and I've covered those or addressed those matters in the highlights package, which you have before you. Just like to summarise by saying I support the conclusions reached in the Section 42A report, and that if these recommendations are endorsed by the panel, then you will have, in some small way, helped achieve the purpose of the Resource Management Act, as well as providing opportunity for a logical extension of the existing Glen Massey village and the community there. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robke. Let's see if we do have any questions for you. Let's start this time with you, Ms. Sedgwick, please.
Thank you. I wonder if you could just help me. What is the population of Glen Massey? I know I'm looking at it and I know I saw it, but
yeah, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but there's probably 70 to 80 houses, probably a population, I'd say, of between 200 and 250.
Right. And you would be proposing a further 70 houses, is that correct?
The plan currently provides for roughly 70 additional lots under country living zone. I'm saying that it would be more appropriate for it to be rezoned to village zone and have roughly that same number. So yes, around 70.
Right. So essentially doubling the size of the place. I'm just wondering whether you could comment on what effect that might have on what is an existing small group of houses.
Yeah, sure. Well, in my opinion, it would be a good thing because the village, if you know the village, it's quite low in the valley, doesn't have great views, not a lot of areas to exercise or to explore. So the farm that my mother has actually does have those things. It has some quite nice high points and a nice gully. So that's sort of, I would see that as being an enhancement. If there was a road that ran along that ridgeline, it would give access, better views, better exercise opportunities, which was one of the key, I just can't remember the name of it, key drivers or key actions from that Glen Massey structure plan. So I think that would be a big thing, a big benefit.
Thank you, that's helpful. And when you started off with your description of Glen Massey, I was a little worried that you might be taking a job as a salesman.
No.
I wasn't going to buy.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Just one question. Just could you just refresh me on the access to this? Is going to be up past the school somewhere? Is it behind the school? The block is, but the access to it is going to come off that road, off the 1 hour road.
Yeah, there's actually two separate blocks. Well, that's how it's shown as one big area, one consistent area, but there's a big gully that runs through the middle. And I don't think anyone would be thinking about putting houses on that gully area because it's quite steep. So what's envisaged is that you'd have two village areas and they wouldn't be developed simultaneously because I don't think everyone wants to live in Glen Massey right now, but maybe over time they will. So you'd start with the eastern block with the access. There's several options for access, or there's at least 3 options and off Wainarau Road. So that's that for the eastern part of the site. For the western part of the site, there's 2 access points off Woolton Collieries Road, and you can see those on your map there. So there are options.
No, that's good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
Thanks very much. It's been explained really well. And I do, as I've said before, I know the area. There are some concerns I understand about Woolton Collieries Road because it's not tar sealed all the way up. So any access point at all, if off Woolton's Collieries Road, is that in the tar seal piece or the metal piece?
Yeah, so any future access off Woolton Colliery is onto tar sealed road. The piece that was is proposed to be rezoned from country living back to rural, which is that piece of land between, we can see on the screen at the moment, to the south. That the Quigley block is further south again. So from there, access is off a metalled road. I'm not exactly sure where I was actually out there on the weekend, so I should know this, but it's basically tar sealed all the way to the end of that green block at least, and probably another 100 meters further. I kind of agree with the comment that the planner made about the steepness of the block that has been or is proposed to be rezoned from country living to rural. It is steep, and access via that onto Wolf and Colliery Road would be, I think, quite difficult. But yeah, that's not what is being proposed. And in fact, in hindsight, the other option could have been to have access from the top, which is actually still reasonably flat. But to answer your question, yeah, it's tar sealed all the way.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Marg?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
No thanks.
Just one from me, and just to make sure I've understood the situation correctly. Can we just put that map back up, please? That was just on before. Can you just explain that at the moment, the green piece of land sort of stops halfway down the western boundary of that red line that's shown, about where the cursor is there. The land immediately to the south of the cursor, but inside the red line, that's your property or your family's property as well, correct?
That's correct, and that's the area that was previously zoned country living.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. You've said you support the officer's report, which is to rezone what was the green area on that earlier map to village. And I just wanted to check with you, you're content that the area further to the south, in other words, the land that's proposed to remain as rural or to be rural, you're content with that?
I think on balance I am, because when we looked at doing a development on this property previously, the problem was density. Putting a road in is really expensive. And when you had 5,000 square meter lots, it was the surveyor said it was marginal himself. And for a surveyor to say that, it must be marginal. So we did have a look, further to the south, and there was no real access there either. So in a way, it's kind of like a trade-off, I suppose. That's probably what I'm saying badly, is if we could get increased density over a smaller area, I think that would be acceptable. Ultimately, like I was saying before, there was no real evidence from the planners about why they did delete that area. This is in the proposed plan, why they did propose to delete that area that was previously country living zone. And when I've made inquiries, it seems like there was a drive along the road and it looked steep, so that was the reason. But there is quite a big area of flat land up on top, not flat as in Tamahiri flat, but flat enough that could have been accessed. But I suppose, putting it shortly, yeah, I'm happy with where the staff have got to. I think it's sensible.
Okay.
It makes sense.
And is that horizontal line at the bottom where the green boundary is that actually a lot demarcation? Is that right?
It's a
parcel. Yeah, it is. Okay, no, that's fine. I understand. All right, thank you, Mr. Robbie. I don't have any questions. That's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're still making good progress. Mr. Hall is present. We'll hear from you now. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Okay.
Have you got a video? Yes, you have.
Is that better? Sorry, this is my first Zoom meeting and I'm quite nervous.
Well, don't be. I don't know if you were here at the start. We said, please don't be nervous. Please just talk to us as if you're sitting across the living room, which it looks as if we sort of are. We're not going to bite your head off. We just want to understand what it is you're seeking, why, and if we don't understand something, we'll just ask you some pretty straightforward questions. So, yeah, don't stress.
Okay, sure. Thanks very much. Do you want to start with the questions or me to start?
No, you start, please.
Okay, I live at number 32 O'Brien Road, which is right on the city boundary at Rotokowrie. We've been there, we've owned it for nearly 33 years, lived there for 32. In our little road, which is about 500 metres long, there are 15 houses already, plus a creche. Because we are zoned rural, one, we can't subdivide, and two, we can't put any more houses on the property. We've already got a house and a 70 square metre second dwelling. I've got two children that badly need to get on the housing market, and we can't see any other way of doing it unless we can, one, subdivide, or two, the district plan is changed so that we could put more houses on the land. The land's been freehold for a number of years. We do run cattle. They probably don't make enough to pay the rates, as I'm sure a lot of you understand. We do have horses. We love living there, but you know, the country needs more houses, and we need more houses at home for our children. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. With that, running the cattle on that land, not being able to pay the rates, ironically, I used to lease all the blocks of land around me and run 100 head of cattle, but they've all been subdivided. So now it's running cattle's pretty much uneconomic. Creating two more or however many more lots in the road won't create any more traffic than already goes to the creche. We're about 200 metres outside the city, and no infrastructure from the council is needed if it was changed to country living zone. Does that sort of make sense, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
I think it is pretty clear.
Yes.
Is that all you want to say? But we're happy to just to now follow that up and see if we have any questions, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, well,
Unless
yes,
you carry. If there's anything else you want to tell us, though, feel free.
No, well, I made 9 points, and I think
Yes.
I've pretty much covered them all. The only one I can think, it's been opposed by the Hamilton City Council, the Waikato Regional Council, and one of the energy companies, and I can't see why they would be opposed to it. Earlier I heard on one of the earlier submissions, one of you saying that you don't want intensive housing, but with country living zone and 5,000 square metre sections, any more development in O'Brien Road wouldn't be intensive. That's all I can think of at the moment, but I'm quite happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hall. Let's see if we do have any questions for you. Mr. Fulton?
No, Mr. Hall, thank you. But you noted that the energy company has opposed every submission to the district plan, so yours is just another one.
Well, it's funny, I've talked to Alan Sanson about this because I know him quite well, and he said they oppose because they can.
Yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't put too much weight on it, that's all.
No.
No, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
No other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
Yes, and I'm just trying to find the information. Very quickly, I'm not. How big is the area and how many 5,000 squares would fit into it?
Well, certainly on my road frontage, I could easily take 2 off, which is, I think, all that's allowed under the district plan. But on some of those other blocks, maybe another 2 or 3, depending on the rules regarding those that have already subdivided, when they could take parcels of land off under the current zoning, which was about 15 years ago.
So those properties around you, they're all rural still, aren't they?
We're all zoned rural down O'Brien Road, yes.
And if you were successful in becoming country living, you could still only get 2 lots off, could you?
Correct, and I certainly wouldn't want to take any more off.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for the information.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick?
I'm just trying to orient myself. So the settlement that's to the right of the screen, what road is that on? Off to the right?
Well, that road is not there. That's a paper road.
Okay.
That
So-
goes between O'Brien Road and
Oh,
Brymer
so
Road.
that's,
but-
oh, Brymer Road, right,
Yeah,
okay.
it's not it's not fenced or anything like that.
Right, okay, no, I get that. And you made a very clear submission. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marg.
No, nothing from me. It was a great submission, though. Thank you very much. It's
Well,
very
thank
clear.
you. Yep.
Mr. Cooney.
Thank you.
No, I don't think I have any questions either. Thanks, Mr. O'Brien. Other than just to ask you, just looking at your property, if we just turn that on to the satellite view rather than, you've got that property at the moment sort of effectively split into 4 sort of distinct areas by virtue of those hedgerows.
Yeah,
Can you just
5 paddocks,
explain
yep.
what's happening with each of those at the moment?
Well, that's where the existing fence lines were when we bought the property.
Yes.
And so I planted trees for shelter,
yes,
for future firewood, and for looks, aesthetics in 1990, which are what you're looking at there.
No, I think that makes sense. But just in terms of the 5 different areas, can you just explain? You said you've got a house and another. I think. Well, actually, I may be confused. Can you just like whereabouts on the property is your house? And please just explain to me
house
what
is where the arrow is right by the main house there now.
Yes. What? And that. Sorry, carry on.
That's where we live. Where my wife and I live. Yep.
Yes. And what's that there? Where the arrow is?
That there's the 70 square metre dwelling, and
That's your minor dwelling. Okay. And what
beside
about
is
further down the property on there?
a tractor and hay shed?
Okay. And they're the current buildings on the site. What's that where the cursor is now?
A sand arena for the girls to do their horse work.
Okay. Okay. No, that's helpful. Thank you. I just wanted to get a sense of how the land was being used. So thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Hall.
Thank you very much.
Is Mr. Pitcher there, please? We may as well just keep going. I think we're due to break at 3:15 and we may as well keep going while we're all here.
Mr. Chair, did you miss somebody there?
No, sorry, Mr. Stameth, if I pronounced his name right, isn't appearing. I just had a note earlier from Mr. Bell to say that he wouldn't be attending the hearing. But there's Mr. Pitcher. Mr. Pitcher, just when you're ready, thank you. Welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you. I thought I'd find that same background image as you.
I can't see you sitting next to me, but never mind.
Yeah, I'm like the last submitter. This is my first hearing, so.
Well, don't stress. I think he survived okay, so I'm sure you'll be likewise.
Yeah, no, adrenaline is pumping, but yeah, my name's Dale Pitcher. I'm owner of 20 Horatu Bridge Road in Portoteu. My wife submitted, I can't remember, about a year ago or something, that we wanted to subdivide our land. So submission 79. We have 1.5 hectares and would like to subdivide a portion of land, a third of its current size, which I can show you in a PowerPoint if that's all good.
That would be great. Thank you.
Can I share my screen?
I think you're enabled to share it, so you've just got to
find it.
You're looking for the share button or the document?
No, I've got it.
Okay. Here we go.
Oh, that'll do. You guys can all see that, eh?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Yeah, so Horatu Bridge Road, and then you've got River Road, and then the Ngaruawahia bypass. This has all been subdivided, Pariti Lane, and we're on this side. So the black outline is our section.
Mm-hmm.
This is where currently my wife and my 2 kids live. And
you, presumably.
Now and then. There's a doghouse out there somewhere. And this is the 5,000 square section that we would like to propose to subdivide.
Okay.
So yeah, obviously there's a demand on housing in New Zealand, Waikato, Hamilton and Horotiu. We're all aware the New Zealand housing market is booming, and the only way to control this is to enable more land, more houses to accommodate demand. We're only trying to provide one section, but this is better than none. And instead of sitting on this prime piece of land, which provides views of the Hakaria Matas, Mount Parongia, and the mighty Waikato Awa, it would be ideal to subdivide. The sections adjacent to us in Pariri Lane have all been subdivided to 5,000 square metre sections, and we'd like to keep it consistent with the sizing with what we're proposing. As we built here a couple of years ago, the soils are pretty good in this area with a CBR reading of 10, so perfect for housing or a house. Our own property has a sanitary system, 2 tanks hooked up to a trickle feed, which is what we envision the proposed lot to have. The proposed lot has access to Te Awa Cycleway and is 5 minutes away from the base, 5 minutes away from one of the 2 Taco Bells in New Zealand, and walking distance from Horotu Primary. We've discussed the subdivision with our neighbours and they all consent. So yeah, in conclusion, we're just looking at rezoning from rural to country living. And that's me.
Very good. Thanks very much, Mr. Pitcher. Let's see if there are any questions for you. Let's start with you, Ms. Gibb, please.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Pitcher. On your northern boundary, is that Sullivan Road there?
Correct. So the 2 other 1.5 hectare sections have access from Sutherland Road. Correct.
Oh, okay. But is your boundary Sutherland Road, or is it further up?
No, our boundary is with one of the neighbours.
Okay, so that's where you can get access down to Te Awa River Road through the River.
Oh, we can get access through the reserve?
Yes.
Down to the Cycleway.
Right.
Our access for our house is off Horotu Bridge Road.
Yes, I've seen that, just not far off the Pariti.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
We're basically opposite Pariti Lane.
Yes. Okay. And so you were wanting, if you got zoned country living, effectively subdivide into 3, but your house is plonked in the middle of that 10,000 square metre section.
We've strategically plonked it north of the section, more so to allow for subdivision to happen.
Okay, so it's a possibility that you could go to 3 lots of 5,000 in there if it was rezoned.
Yeah, there'll be a bit of strategic work around placement of housing as there's this flat bit of land up here, and then it just drops away down to the Cycleway. So
right.
It'll be
your intention, is it, at the moment? You just look. Okay.
I've got a couple of kids and they like the space, so we probably wouldn't go down to 3 sections.
No. Okay, just thanks for that clarity. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pitcher. You'll be aware that your neighbouring properties are also in part of this discussion over subdivision?
Yes, this section up here, correct? Yeah. I think they're looking at wanting to do 3,000 squares. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not giving details on that, but I'm aware of it. And have you had much discussion with them about being able to be linked into some of their evidence?
No, I haven't spoken to them.
That's okay. Okay, I was just checking I had the right area. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick?
I have no questions, but thank you for your submission, and I hope it wasn't as scary as you were thinking.
All good.
Mr. Marg?
Thank you very much, but I have no questions.
And Mr. Cooney?
The zoning of the land across the road from you, what is that, do you know?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the land across the road from you. Do you know what it's zoned? Where the development has taken place?
Oh, and here, so that's country living.
It's actually been zoned country living, is it?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't have any questions at all. Thank you, Mr. Pitcher. Pretty sure that wasn't too scary.
No, it's all good. Cheers.
All right, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, you're here, so I think we'll press on and hear from you too. Thank you. You got your sound off, Mr. Smith. There you go.
Should be on air now.
That's got it. Thank you.
Right. You will have received my original submission and my evidence and my speaker's notes, so I won't go through them as you required this morning. My initial problem was I was very disappointed with Section 52 report, the 42 report, and the fact that all the submissions from the fringe of Tamahere were all thrown into a bucket and declined. And I didn't feel as though my submission had been given correct attention. I felt it deserved a bit more than that. But now I understand, having listened to Ms. Tate's discussion this morning, that she feels very bound by the future-proof and the regional statements and the national policy statements. And I just note that residents don't have the chance to submit to those particularly. We've been asked to put submissions into the district plan, and that's what we were doing. So that's what I've done. Now, in my original submission, I talked about the analogy with the old story about the duck, that if something looks like a duck, quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it probably is a duck. And the precinct I'm talking about looks like country living, feels like country living, and it just isn't zoned country living, despite the fact that a lot of them are quite small lots in terms of country living. You talked this morning from those future-proof and things, the need not to add to existing country living areas. We wouldn't be doing that here. We'd be infilling what is already essentially country living. There'd be no call on any extra services. There'd be minimum extra work on the road. The soils are generally bad. There's some areas of Class 3 wet, and in summer they get very, very dry and don't grow, and in winter they get very, very wet. So any development there would require specific geotechnical investigations and probably minimum floor levels and so on. So in my speaker's notes, you'll notice I've been through all the points that were considered, and I don't think that the Summerfield Lane precinct actually meets any of the points that were used to discredit the other request to change the country living. So there's a brief statement, so you can have afternoon tea.
Oh no, we're not in a hurry to have afternoon tea. We're more interested in making sure that we hear particularly what it is you want to tell us. So if there is anything else you want to say, feel free.
Well, I think it's all there. I've in both my notes and my original evidence, I've talked about the soils. I included soil reports for the two parts of the subdivision. I've addressed the development and the country living nature of it and where it's placed, halfway between Hamilton and Cambridge, that it would be well placed to be rezoned as country living. The possibility of development there is limited, even though some of the sections are quite large, because of the way houses are already placed, and in one case the access to the bit of land that would be possible would not be easy. So certainly any building within the country living rules would not change the nature of the area at all.
All right, now I think that, let's see if we've got any questions for you. Mr. Marg?
Nothing from me, thank you, but totally understand what you're saying.
Ms. Sedgwick?
Could we see, I wonder if Mr. Bell, if we could see a Google Earth of that area, because I'm trying to grasp where you say the precinct is well separated from any urban areas, and the infill wouldn't alter the character or add a fringe of an established urban urban or village area. So,
It's about 4 k's from Tamahiri.
right,
You head towards Cambridge.
right.
Yeah, there's
So-
no urban areas around there at all.
So it's its own little, oh, thank you, Mr. Bell. Right,
So you see that's just to the north there, you've got the new expressway.
yeah, yeah.
And if you go northwest about 4 or 5 k's, you're in at the Tamahiri Church
Oh,
area.
right, okay, yeah.
So yeah, it's well separated from.
Okay, no, I understand, thank you. And thank you also for your very clear submission, which covered a lot of points. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Gibb.
And no questions, thank you.
Mr. Fulton.
Just for clarity, in previous hearings we had the airport zone, which didn't allow for any subdivision over a fair bulk of land. Is your area, or more intensity, is your area involved in that?
No, I believe we're outside that zone.
You're outside that zone, okay. Okay, that's all. I just want to clarify that you were outside it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cooney.
How big's your property?
My property is 1.1 hectares. And about half of that's in the house and native trees. And then there's the lower flatland.
And it's zone rural at the moment.
Yes, yeah.
And would you be seeking to subdivide off a lot off that?
I probably would, but I would be holding it until such stage as I get old and silly and want to go and live on the flat instead of on the little hill we're on at the moment.
Okay. And the properties around you, they're zone rural as well, are they?
Yes, yeah, that whole precinct's zone rural right through there.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. That's pretty clear. I don't have any questions either. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Our pleasure. That's what we're here for. Thank you. We're sort of close to morning tea time, but we're afternoon tea time, sorry, but we're also pretty close to the end of hearing submissions for today. And I just want to check, is Mr. Bigwood or Mr. or Mrs. Burnett on the line? Doesn't look like it as far as I can tell. Nor Mr. or Mrs. DeLangan. So I think what we will do then is we'll break for a quarter of an hour. We'll resume again at 3:30. If you're intending to stay on the call, please don't disconnect. Please just mute and turn your video off, and we'll resume again in 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone. It looks like we've got all the panel present, but it doesn't look like we've got any of our submitters that are wanting to be heard. I don't believe.
No, Mr. Bigwood.
Doesn't look like it unless he's
just joined us now.
No.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. Thanks very much. Just when you're ready, folks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name's Steve Bigwood from Bloxham, Burnett and Oliver. Hopefully you can hear us all okay?
Yes, we can. Yes. Thanks.
That's great. So to my right, I have Grant Burnett, and to my left, I have Marilena Burnett, who are the applicants or submitters to the zone change.
Very good. Thanks. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. This is my first time presenting to the hearings panel. So my understanding is we present to you and you'll ask us various questions. Please feel free to stop me at any stage if you're as I'm presenting and addressing the issue as they come up.
Just so that you are aware, we've made it pretty clear throughout the proceedings thus far that we've read the material that you have provided. I see that you have got a presentation. There's no need for you to read screeds of evidence that we've pre-read. We're keen for you to present to us the nature of what it is you're seeking and why. And I would have thought that your presentation's a pretty good starting point for that.
Okay, sure. So yes, I've just got a little introductory statement, and then we'll get into the presentations if we can. Yeah, so Mr. and Mrs. Burnett opposed the rural zoning of their property at 50 Te Awa Lane and requested the property be rezoned as country living zone with all other policy overlays unchanged. And I refer to the commissioners to the submission and the statements of evidence that we've submitted, and I'm quite happy to answer any questions on those as you have them. My opening submission is that the commissioners should accept the position expressed in the submission and the statements of evidence over those expressed in the Section 42A framework report and the rebuttal evidence tabled by Ms. Tate. The Section 42A framework report and rebuttal evidence tabled, in my opinion, are deficient because neither have, other than at a curiosity level, considered and assessed the submission and evidence presented on behalf of the submitter. Therefore, in the absence of any evidence challenging or contrary to the position in the submission and my statements of evidence, I simply do not see how the commissioners could come to any other decision but to accept the rezoning of the property to country living zone. I wondered if you could put the presentation up now, please.
Do you want to do that, Mr. Bitney? There we go. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you go to the slide, next one. So this slide here shows the location of the property, yes, where the blue star is, and its location relative to Hamilton City Council boundaries and the Cambridge Township, which is off to my right.
Yep, no, we understand where you are, thanks.
Okay, if you go to the next one, please. Okay, so this is a zoomed in aerial of what we call the Te Awa Road or Te Awa Lane country living zone. And as you can see, it's pretty much all developed at this point in time for country living zone. If you go to the next one, please. So this is the site and that we're looking to get rezoned. The site is at the end of Te Awa Lane. It is bordered on one side by the Waikato River, and all the way around its, I'll say, northern and southern boundaries is a local purpose walkway reserve. The properties surrounding it are pretty much developed for rural residential or country living purposes, even those properties that are currently zoned rural. If you go to the next one, please. So this is just an illustration, I guess, of the development around 50 Te Awa Lane. And as you can see from all the areas hatched in green, they're already developed as rural residential or country living zone activities. And the vast majority of them already have houses on them. And the next one, please. Okay. So this again, aerial just shows that the property is located at the end of Te Awa Lane. And you can see from the red line on that plan, that is the local purpose reserve or walkway reserve that sort of surrounds the Burnett property. It runs all the way from the end of Te Awa Lane right down to the Esplanade Reserve fronting the Waikato River.
Just if I may make a point at that stage there, you can see that it's an old photograph, Google Map, because there are houses now where those sections are bare. They've been built, in other words, they're already residential.
Thank you.
So did you capture that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
we did.
This one here is a draft scheme plan of how the property may be subdivided to meet the country living zone standards of the district plan. On that scheme plan that you're looking at there, in our view, only the lots to the right are land that is high quality soils. The land to the left is already developed by an existing dwelling, and then where lot 6 is, that's on a lower plateau that has been, it's not suitable for rural activities. So you'll see from our submission that the property is already served by a roading system, and that roading system is suitable for an additional 4/5 extra lots. All utility services are available. We've provided a geotechnical report to say that the area is suitable for houses and for septic tanks and wastewater systems. We've also provided an archaeological report prepared by Mr. Gumley that demonstrates that the land has no archaeological or cultural features other than the site that's already identified on the property. And the site that's identified on the property is where the existing dwelling is. So in Mr. Gumley's view, the site is already compromised. Could you go back? Yeah. So sorry, could you take off the presentations at the moment, please? So it's our submission that there are very practical reasons for rezoning this property to country living zone. It is the last property, I guess, on Te Awa Lane that is not country living zone or developed for rural residential purposes. The Section 32A report that was prepared to support the country living zone and rural zones both clearly indicated that land of 4 hectares down to 5,000 square metres were already compromised and are not economic farming units. This is an exact property in case. The land cannot be easily amalgamated to other properties. As we've identified, there's a local purpose reserve, walkway reserve that surrounds the property. Therefore, any amalgamation would require the removal of that local purpose reserve, which is obviously a council and statutory process that we'd need to go through to do that. And all the land surrounding it are effectively 5,000 to 8,000 square metre lots, which would require all them to be purchased and all the rural residential development on them removed to even attempt to make an economic unit. Yes. In the submission and evidence that were presented, there's I guess, a policy disagreement between the council's report writer and myself. In my view, the policy is quite clear that this is a property that meets the policy and objectives for country living and rural residential purposes. And I think the conflict, I guess, between our opinions relates to the way that we've looked at it. I think the staff reporter has looked at it from a high-level, broad perspective, whereby we've provided you lots and lots of evidence from a site-specific purpose that shows quite clearly, in my view anyway, that it meets the objectives and policies, both of the district plan, the regional policy statements, and also the NPS for urban development, which I'll address shortly as well. Right. So, sorry, can you go back to the slides, please? Sorry, the next one, please. Right. So these two maps here come from the Future Proof and the Regional Policy Statement. In my view, they clearly show the urban limits of settlements within the Future Proof and Waikato region. And as you can see from both of those, the Burnett property at 50 Te Awa Lane is clearly outside any urban limits, and even outside the area that is potential future urban areas. That's shown as the purple area in map 2 there. So it's my submission that the staff report writer is incorrect in the assumption that the property is part of the urban area of Hamilton. Okay, and finally, I'd like to address the rebuttal evidence of Ms. Tate. So I'll just have a quick read of a statement here. Mrs. Tate, in her rebuttal evidence, has reversed her opinion in regard to the rezoning of the Yamalidi Lane area, now recommending that it be rezoned country living zone. She has distinguished her opinion in regards to the rezoning of this property by concluding that the site is not physically constrained or defined to the extent that it would prevent others south of 50 Te Awa Lane also seeking to rezone their land in time. I disagree with this statement. As outlined, the site is both physically constrained and defined by the Waikato River and the Local Purpose Reserve. Moreover, the properties to the south do not need to be rezoned as they are already of a country living zone size and are developed accordingly. Ms. Tate in her rebuttal evidence also identifies that high-class soils land cannot be rezoned where it is not defined by physical features such as that amalgamation with adjoining rural land and uses is not possible. If this is the case, and sorry, could you go to the next slide, please? So if this is the case, why is it the council have rezoned to country living an area of land within the Te Awa Road that is high-class soil and is used for rural purposes with adjoining land in the same ownership? Is it a case of council picking winners or favouring well-known personalities? It is a case of council, in my opinion, when assessing the merits of the two properties, that's the 50 Te Awa Lane and the one circled on there, the submitter's property is more consistent with the objectives and policies than the Te Awa Road property. So in conclusion, the rezoning of the site will enable a more efficient, effective and sustainable use of the site, given that it is of a size that is too small to farm and too large to garden. It encourages the retention of rural zone land elsewhere that may be able to be amalgamated to create larger, more productive rural land parcels. Due to the size, location and separation from other rural zone properties, the proposed rezoning of the site will result in a logical extension of the existing country living zone and is deemed a more appropriate and efficient use of the site. The rezoning of the subject site will not lead to sporadic and uncoordinated land fragmentation and will not pressure council to upgrade transportation and surfacing infrastructure, as all services are able to be managed and provided for on site or able to be catered for through existing capacity. And adopting the rezoning is considered to be a positive planning decision that would enable the council to better respond to high levels of growth and anticipated demand for housing in the district and provide greater competition and choice in the housing land market. And for those reasons, we think it's very clear that the land should be rezoned. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bigwood. Let's see if there's any questions for you or Mr. and Mrs. Burnett. Let's start with you, Mr. Marg, please.
Yes, thank you. Can we go back to one of those maps whereby I think it was, oh gosh, it's a side picture where the development has been proposed. That's it. Very good. If we look at the neighbor on, I guess, the bottom side, previously that was in grass and now it's obviously been rezoned. Are you aware of what zoning classification are on these properties on the bottom as well as the top?
Yes, okay, so the top of the property, that's all country living zone.
Right.
The land to the bottom is rural zone.
Okay, and I totally understand where the Section 42 report writers talking about the, looking at our high-class soils and retaining them. How many people in and around, or how many properties are actually farming at the moment?
None.
Right. And the area that we'd be looking at here from a grass perspective or soil perspective is less than.
We estimate that the 4 lots that you can see up on the flat area there is about 2 hectares in area.
Yeah, that was my understanding too. Hey, look,
Total property is more or
much.
less, it's 3 hectare property more or less, isn't it, in total?
It's a 4 hectare property.
4 hectare, okay, thanks.
Yeah, but there's, by the time you, there's a large section, as you can see there, with the Esplanade Reserve. And so that's effectively quite a steep bank area down through there.
Right.
So I have no other further questions, but thank you very much for what you've provided. It's been very helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Sedgwick, any questions?
I don't have questions. I'm familiar, I believe, with this property through the SNA and the Maori sites work. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibb?
No, I think my question was going to be about lot 7, but it's been answered now. I was wondering what the topography was, and it looks to me like all around that area's already got the Esplanade Reserve, or and it's only that bit of land that hasn't.
That's correct. So a subdivision of this property would enable the Esplanade Reserve to be completed all the way along the Waikato River there.
But as you say, the topography is quite steep, but yes, I get the point about the completion. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
No, I have no questions, but thank you very much. Good submission.
Mr. Cooney?
Can we show the slide with the blue etching round the site, your site? Yeah, okay. Now, the properties to the up above that, yeah, around there, what are they? I know they're country living activities, but is it zoned country living?
Yes, it is. And I'm just wondering, could you go to the very last slide, please? Yeah, so that's the country living zone map. So the one on the my left, that's the proposed district plan map. And as you can see from all the green shading, that's the country living zone.
Yeah.
And so, if you look at the bottom of that one where there's those two purple circles,
yeah,
you can see the Burnett property or 50 Te Awa Lane property is the last one there that has not been rezoned to country living. Yes, that one there.
Okay. Okay. So the 42A author is saying, look, don't provide the ability to re-subdivide down because it'll foreclose on options to provide residential development, more intensive residential development later in time. That's the sort of rationale, isn't it?
I believe it's slightly different from that. I think they're saying we should preserve that for its high quality soils, which as you can see from there, it's uneconomic. It hasn't been farmed for quite a few years. It's about 2 hectares of land, and if we were trying to farm that, you couldn't do anything intensive on it. It's surrounded by rural residential neighbours, and so the types of activities that you could do there are very limited in our opinion.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at that report. I thought it was a bit wider than that. I thought it was to stop the full, to keep open the ability to more closely create a greater density on the property in the future.
I haven't picked that up, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Just one from me, I think, or maybe two. I just want to understand, I'm just getting just looking at the picture that's on the screen now. Where's north?
It's on the screen, the top of the screen is north.
Yeah, the top of the screen.
That's what I'm trying to reconcile. How does that orange approach to the airport, doesn't that run north-south?
So the one that you're looking at there, sir, is the cross runway. So that's
I see. Okay.
The little trainer planes come in.
Okay, that's where I was confusing myself.
So to the left of the property, I don't know if you play golf, but that's the Lockhill Golf Club.
Yeah, I know where that is. No, I know where you are. I was just trying to understand the orientation of this particular drawing because for some reason I didn't appreciate that was the east-west runway. In fact, I didn't know Hamilton had an east-west runway. That's why I was confused. because the picture didn't seem to make sense, but the layout of the properties did. So anyway, the question I have for you is, what does the airport flight surfaces provisions, what effect do they have on the ability to subdivide country living zone if in fact the Burnett property was zoned country living?
My understanding is they have no effect on the property. Effectively, what you're looking at there is a height control. And if we go back a couple of photos to the aerial, you'll see that the property, yeah, that one will be fine, thanks. As you can see, there's a lot of mature trees on the property. So any housing, if you like, will be well below the height of many of those trees on the property. And those
I thought there was also, and it may not be on that runway, but I thought there was also, in addition to a height surface, there was a limit on subdivision in the area within the airport control surface. Is that not your understanding? Have I got that wrong?
That's not our understanding, sir. And as you can see, the land around it has all been subdivided.
No, I understand that. And I understand the logic of having zone boundaries sort of line up. And this one, as has the one that you pointed out further to the north, sort of create a very wiggly edge to the northern and southern extent of the zone. I take that point. I was just trying to understand, though, notwithstanding the zoning, whether that flight control surface actually prevented subdivision of the type that you're talking about, even if it was zoned country living. But you're saying it doesn't. We can check that.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, if I may say. Of course, there needs to be double glazing and those sort of soundproofing requirements.
Yes.
Any residential building that goes in that area. But apart from that, there's nothing else that's required.
We'll check that. I just seem to recall from the country living hearings, which were a long time ago, and I haven't refreshed my memory on what was said there. I had just had a feeling, though, that there was a subdivision control within that airport control surface, as well as the things that you've talked about, but we can check that for ourselves.
The flight path restriction plan has been changed, I would suggest, during that time.
Yeah, okay. No, we'll follow that up ourselves. Thank you for providing your view on it. Thank you. I don't have any further questions. Thank you very much. The submission's very clear. Oh, sorry, Mr. Cooney.
Mr. Chair, I wonder whether Ms. Tate can just explain her rationale on this one, whether it was high-class soils or something a little bit more than that.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
The rationale on this one was not the issue that you raised. So it was less about, while my conclusion was that the site sits within the Hamilton urban environment, i.e. it forms part of the housing and labour market of Hamilton. I didn't purport that it sat within that future expansion area. I guess the issues with this site was that it was just that the avoid policies around high-class soils, which the objective seeks to protect high-class soils, and that is given effect by two policies, two key policies. One is to avoid the reduction of high-class soils from inappropriate subdivision and I guess this applies to all of the rezoning requests, but the inappropriate subdivision development and use. But there's also a provision, the policy 6.1 directs that where growth is planned, then it is appropriate to use, I guess that would be considered appropriate development, subdivision and use. So yes, there is the high class soils argument. And then I think that there's just the more generic argument that it doesn't fall within urban limits, it's unplanned, it's not an efficient use of land, to just keep rezoning to country living zone.
Okay, thank you.
But I mean, does it make any sense to have a zone boundary with the wiggle in it that happens at the bottom end there? And you say this is high class soil, but what's it going to be used for? What's the practical alternative to putting some houses on it?
As far as I'm aware, the requirement for the rural zone is not that it delivers an economic return solely. There is alternative uses for rural land than just farming to make money.
But what are you going to use the elite soils for if they're landlocked, completely uneconomic, and can't be used as elite soils? Surely that would then, I mean, you read the policy out that talks about protecting them from inappropriate development. What's inappropriate about this, especially given that it lines the boundary of the zone up to a logical straight edge and say this is in, the other side is out? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me, I've got to say. It just seems to be this doctrinaire approach that says we can't have any further country living area, full stop. And I don't think that's what the planning documents say. And I'm being direct so that you're in no doubt what my thinking is, but would invite you to reply. You don't have to protect elite soils for the sake of it. You have to protect them from inappropriate use. And in this particular case, what other use can you envisage that land might be used for that uses the elite soils for some sort of productive elite soil related use?
I'm potentially speaking outside my area of expertise, but I'm sure you could have hobby gardens that rely on elite soils. It's like
really?
I say, well,
really?
I would have thought so, yes.
So that's a reason not to rezone the land, is that someone might build a hobby garden on it. I've got to say I'm staggered by that approach. Anyway, I can't take that any further, but thank you very much. Mr. Cooney, do you have any further questions on that?
No, thank you. No, I don't.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Burnett. Thank you, Mr. Bigwood. Mr. and Mrs. Bigwood, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to, I think, Mr. and Mrs. De Langen. I think, Mr. Langen, you finished mowing your hay or whatever it was you were doing before. So welcome. If you wouldn't mind turning your video on, Mr. De Langen, if you're able to do that, please.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe he has a video, but
it doesn't appear to have any volume up. Can you hear us, Mr. or Mrs. De Langen? Because I don't know about anybody else, but I can't hear or see anything. I just heard something rumble in the background. I wonder if we've maybe made contact. Can you say something, Mr. or Mrs. De Langen, and see if we can hear you? I'm at a bit of a loss to know what we can do. The submitter seems to be there. I think they're there on both on phone and on online. But
May I suggest disconnect from both devices and just reconnect on your phone, Mr. Langman?
yeah, he can hear us obviously, but can't. Just while we're waiting, is the panel of when we finish today? We're going to finish a little early. Can we just have a bit of a debrief on today when all our customers have gone, please?
Absolutely.
Very good. I think we've come to a landing. I think we can see you, Mr. Langdon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, cool.
Well done.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Galangan. I'm sort of backing on the Matangi factory side, and I heard that you had a bit of discussion a couple of days ago regarding that area of the Matangi factory.
Yes.
And I put a submission in to hopefully not allow the commercial part of it to be extended to the back of my property.
Yep, we've read your submission. We've read your submission, and we understand where you're located, and we understand the setting. There's a picture on the. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah, I'm on my cell phone, so it's really hard. But yes, I can see it. So what I was hoping is that basically the back section was going to stay as rural because Mr. Mulbrae was talking to me regarding putting houses all through there. So basically, as I look out from my property, I look straight at dwellings. He's already got 2 dwellings there, and he's told me he's wanting to put another 2 there. So pretty much I'll be enclosed with dwellings.
Yep.
Yep. So I can really barely see your picture, but oh, that's a little bit better. Oh, yeah, that's better. So what I was hoping was that I just wanted to put my case forward, basically, is to say why. So our property, we've had it since 2020. 2000. So we've had it for 20 years, and we sort of established a horse area. Basically, we train horses up and sell horses. So what we're having is the industrial side is now growing around us, which is now making it a little bit dangerous for us to do what we want. We've got basically they're building stuff there, and they're throwing canisters and fires, and they pop and they do all sorts of stuff, and they pop up, just basically like a commercial site, I guess, something that you can't predict what's going to happen. So we're pretty much getting scared out of our area as far as the horses go. So what we're submitting is we've got a proposal that we could cut off. If you can see right down the corner of our property at the left-hand side, I can see your cursor. No, other side, sorry. So sort of towards so if you come down and you sort of see where my driveway comes in, you'll see an old dwelling, which is, keep going with your cursor towards the Good Street side, right there. What we're wanting to do is to put a submission in to cut that dwelling off, because we've got 2 dwellings. So what we're wanting to do is basically capitalize on our property and probably move on, to be honest, because it's coming into a situation that we can't run our what we're wanting to do on our property, what our property was set up to do. And as you can see in the pictures, we've spent an awful lot of money on setting up our property for what we want. And Mr. Mulbrae has big intentions of what he wants to do. And he's pretty much telling me what he's doing, not asking my advice. So I'm pretty much getting things in the mail saying, this is what's going to happen. You've got to apply. And so he just dropped a house in about a year ago. So that's basically put closer to my boundary than it should be, but it had resource consent because they felt it didn't have any impact to my property, but it does, all that stuff does. So I'm in a rural area, but feel like I'm in a commercial residential area, if you know what I mean. So that's where I was sort of putting my case forward on that. I haven't got anything in front of me because I've been caught on the hop. So yeah, that's what we're sort of thinking of and what we submitted as well.
Well, I think you've made your point, and we're aware of it because we have read your submission and we know where your property is in relation to Mr. Mowbray's proposal, and we've heard some quite detailed evidence from him about what he wants to do and why. But I think we understand the point of view that you're making, and we'll just have to figure out what we think the appropriate answer is based on what he's told us and what you've told us.
Yeah, so for us, it's pretty much, it's really hard to see in those photos, but our dwelling that we live in is just down from that cursor. So that one there, and we look out, all of our living area looks straight out to where Mowbrays are putting us. No, not that side, to the back end of the property, because you're only talking about 7 acres. So we've got no trees here. So you look straight into the housing that he's putting up there. So basically, we're just getting built in. It's we're pretty much told it's my way or the highway type thing. So he's told me he's wanting to put another 2 more dwellings beside that, is what his intentions are.
Whereabouts, just where the cursor is it up further there?
No. So you carry on, go towards, no. So you see the water, keep going up. It's hard to say. Go back onto my property, there, and you see where the old house is there?
Yeah.
There's a house there, and he's put another house beside that house.
He's bought that property, has he?
Yeah, so that property is, that where you can see that white line is actually currently classified as rural, and the council's now putting in a submission that they want to do exactly what you've just shown, that. But on the one that I've just seen recently that you guys put on last week, that whole area was purple, including those 2 houses, which makes it industrial completely. So you know how you just made it go purple and there's a white rectangle? Yeah. And there's 1 dwelling on there that it clearly shows. There's actually 2 on there now. They're sort of 100 and something square meter houses. There's 2 of them. He's made one of them as a, what's it called? A traveller's lodge. And the other one is a classic railway house. It's been there since I've been here.
I think he more recently purchased that block.
Yeah, he purchased it off, I think the Maoris sold it. It used to be a guy, Jeff Bigham, when we first moved in, he leased that land. And then he bought it off the Maoris. I'm not sure when he did, obviously when he purchased the factory. And Jeff Bigham since passed away, so he's taken over that. So he's moved in a house last year, right beside that house on the right-hand side of that house. So he's actually got 2 dwellings. It only shows 1, 2, but he's wanting to put another 2 on there, which will clearly show 4 dwellings across that boundary. And that just basically makes us really what we've set up to do, not very safe.
Who owns the property that's still in white with the building shape on it?
I can't see. Oh, yeah, that's the one. So that building shape, that is part of the Mowbrays factory. So,
right, but it's not in the purple.
That's purple, but the white is also theirs. And the reason there's a red line that runs parallel with that is because that used to be rural. And now they've changed it to industrial.
Right.
And well, they haven't changed it yet. They're wanting to change it to industrial, which I agree with. That part there should be, because it's a bit weird to have rural land running along the railway line, a little strip, but it shouldn't pass my boundary. because it's basically making me lose my country feel. It's just gone, you know, and if that's going to happen, then I always think what's good for one, it's good for all, you know, you open the doors for everyone, because it's basically changed what my plans are on the property and what I've worked hard for the last 20 years for and spent a lot of money on.
I think we understand the point that you've made, and it's a point that's been well made. As I said before, we've got two competing sets of wishes here. The fact that the report that you've seen from the council staff recommends a certain course of action, that's just a recommendation to us. I mean, ultimately, we have to make a decision based on everything that we've heard. And I just want to say to you that what you've said to us today is an important part of that process. So we know you've come into the hearing process a bit late. That doesn't matter. You've had the opportunity to say what you've said. We haven't made any decision yet about what the right answer should be, but that's the tricky job we've got in front of us, to figure all this out, and that's what we'll do.
Yeah, because what it's going to do is make my place dangerous.
I understand that. What sort of horses are you training? What sort of horses are you working with there?
We're working with German riding ponies. So my wife quite high up in the German riding pony side of it. So we import ponies.
Are they warm bloods?
No, they're American. German. So they're not warm bloods.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is we import them at a very high cost. You know, we're talking $80,000-$90,000. So we're not talking peanuts. And if something happens to them, which, I mean, I don't want to go on the whole thing, but he flies in on his helicopter and he parks right near the corner of my property. This is what I'm up against, and this is what I'm not happy with. It's just, we're just getting run out of our own block of land, basically. So he flies in on his helicopter and he parks right on that corner of that property, of my property and his property. And you can imagine what what the horses do if somebody's riding them. So we sort of just want to make sure that we get heard. And then when we suddenly saw a purple line appear, that the council sort of said, hey, we think this is what the boundary should be, because that purple line obviously isn't in action yet, because as far as I know, that part is still rural land. And next thing I see a purple line that's protruding my boundary and actually coming right up towards their house. And then Mr. Mulgray said he's thinking about putting 2 more dwellings there. So basically I've got 4 dwellings right on my back property. His factory on the left-hand side, which, I mean, hey, it was there before I purchased the property. I can't, argue that one, but this one I can. It sort of changes the rural outlook of my property.
Yeah, I think you've made the point, and we understand the point that you're making. The point that I'm making is that we've got to evaluate this based on all the information that we have, which includes yours. And I think we understand it, but let's see if we've got any questions just to help round things out, if there are any. Ms. Gibb?
No, I don't have questions, thanks.
Ms. Sedgwick?
No, I have no questions. You made your point very clearly, and it's very understandable. Thank you very much.
Mr. Marg?
No, thank you.
Mr. Fulton?
But do appreciate, after having had the hearing last week, a better understanding from you, and appreciate you making the submission. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Marg?
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Cooney?
No, thanks.
No, and I don't have any questions either, thanks, Mr. De Langen. That's clear. As I say, we've now got to put our thinking caps on and figure out what the appropriate answer is, and we'll do that when we issue our decisions. But thank you very much for your time today.
Awesome. So I'll be kept informed with what's going on now, or?
Well, there will be a decision made on all the submissions, and that's still a little way away. You're not going to find anything out in the next very short time, because we've got to complete all these hearings across the whole district, and then we issue a final decision, which is probably towards the end of the year before we get to that point.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, folks, I think that brings us to the end of today. There's nobody else here that's expecting to be heard today, I don't believe. So I think on that basis, we'll adjourn. but if the panel and Ms. Ratt and Mr. Bell and Ms. Kelly wouldn't mind waiting behind for a moment, and everyone else could log off, we'll see you, the rest of you, tomorrow. So we're adjourned.